For a solid 60 minutes, I was rolling around, lying on my friend's floor in his real estate office, my good friend Sam Pompeo. I was rolling around in his office saying repeatedly, Sammy, I cannot go to prison. I cannot go to prison. This is unreal. This is insane. I continued to say I cannot go to prison because earlier that day, the FBI showed up at my home. They told me that I was the subject of a federal investigation and it may be a good idea to get a lawyer. From there, I hopped in the car, smoked a solid 2 packs of cigarettes on the way there, got to his office, smoked probably another 8 or 9 cigarettes before I rolled in. This is back in California at the time where you could smoke outdoors without getting arrested. From there, I went into his office, rolled around on the floor, and began to say, I cannot go to prison. 3 years to the day later, on April 28th, 2008, I went to federal prison, not knowing how many benefits would be involved in this journey, not knowing how helpful it would be to me. But what about Jussie Smollett? If he goes to prison, will it help him? Are there some benefits for him? So if this cash-strapped state of Illinois is going to warehouse him for a year or so, will it help him? I'm going to discuss that in this video today. Before I do, thank you so much for liking and subscribing and commenting, only if you find value. Thank you again for being here. With that said, let's jump right into, will prison be a value for Mr. Smollett? Let's get going. So as I get into the benefits of prison for Mr. Smollett, let me address some obvious things. I know he hasn't been sentenced yet, but I do think he's going to get some time in prison because he perjured himself on the stand and the judge is going to make an example out of him. That's one. Two, I know some of you think I am crazy because you have said in comments from our last video that he is narcissistic, he will never accept responsibility, he continues to blame other people. You are thinking, dude, you are crazy. Admittedly, you have to be a little bit crazy to do what I do, rolling on YouTube, talking about prison and every bad decision I've ever made in my life. Indeed, my family for a number of years until this thing worked thought that I was a little bit nuts, but here I am hoping to help. My point is that I can change in prison. If hundreds of our clients over the years can change in prison and use the time productively, so can he, but he's going to have to work. No happy talk, no blaming, no excusing. He's got to get to work and recognize as we transition to our trusted screen share from our website, A White Collar Advice, where you should go to digest all of our free resources. So the first thing that he can really do in prison is focus on the victims and the ripple effects that have come from his action. So specifically, we wrote, many people do not come to understand until prison how their conduct created victims or caused other ripple effects in the community beyond their own harm. Acknowledging direct and indirect victims and beginning to take action to show remorse or make amends can be very healing. In prison, he will have ample opportunity to reflect, presuming he doesn't want to live like an ostrich with his head buried in the sand, pretending this isn't happening or continuing to blame. It may take a couple of months to do this because at first you're nervous, you're scared, your prison job, adjusting, getting separated from your community takes time. But in time, he will have ample time to think about the victims. And I do believe, I know some of you are going to call me crazy, I do believe in time, similar to how Lance Armstrong came clean, wish he'd have done it sooner. I do believe in time he will come clean and acknowledge how his impact, how his behavior hurt other people. Certainly there will people that will say he's only now doing that because he wants to work again. He misses the $100,000 per episode. He will never win, nor will he get everybody back in his corner to be successful as a convicted felon, which he is, which I am. You don't need everyone in your corner. You need some people to believe in you, but you've got to prove worthy of that love and support. And it begins with identifying with the victims, the people that you hurt. That's his family. That's the community. That's people who someday will actually fall victim to a hate crime and may not be believed because of this case. Continuing on, let's talk about perspective. A benefit to serving time in prison is finding perspective. The reality is Mr. Smullett had it better than most people. He overcame, he worked hard, he grew to have a successful career. But prison provides an opportunity to recalibrate, to develop this perspective and recognizing how many of his fellow prisoners have had it so much worse than him, who grew up with parents in prison, trauma from crime, in and out of the juvenile justice system, releasing to no network, to few opportunities, many of them because they've been in and out of the system or uneducated. So he's got to find a sense of perspective that people have it worse. People have endured much worse. Indeed, learning from those who had endured such struggle helped me get through some tough days because in reality, it wasn't that tough to compared to what most people in prison have endured for a much longer period of time than I did for a year, or he will endure if it's 6 months or a year, whatever it is still a little blip in his life. He's got to find some perspective. Continuing on, let's talk about the network. So here's an unfortunate consequence of a criminal conviction. Your network tends to go bye-bye. Certainly there are some people that stand by you, but you've embarrassed people, you've hurt people, you've lied to people, and people hear convicted felon and they run. Not necessarily good for the brand to be bringing a convicted felon to dinner, along with these press releases that castigate you as a criminal. For that reason, his network is destroyed. Well, here's a benefit to prison. You're kind of starting over. Okay. So this is what my business partner, Michael Santos, who served 26 years in prison, told me, because there was no email when I was in prison. He said, why don't you just get a notepad and start writing letters to people you know, people you don't know, letting them know how you're going to be better and emerge stronger with your dignity. Well, Mr. Smullett can do that same thing in prison. He's got to prove worthy of all these people that are continuing to support him. I read something that Beyonce's mom wrote a letter. I don't know. All I know is there's a lot of people that stand by him. He's got to prove worthy of it, but he also has to grow his network. That really comes back to the first thing I mentioned, which was you've got to identify with victims. He's got to come clean. And if it's in his self-interest to work again, to make money again, to somehow give back again, he's going to need a network, and he's going to have to learn to accept responsibility. Continuing on, as we heard on the stand, this is a benefit to prison, presuming some programming exists. I'm not a huge fan of prison programming because most of the time it's useless, and they give you a certificate that is kind of useless in the real world. You need to emerge with skills and values. That said, there can be some substance abuse programs in prison. So a benefit to Mr. Smullett is addressing his substance abuse. As you may know, on the stand, he testified that the two people who he claims jumped him, who they said he was training, he said he did cocaine and he did drugs with them. So you could argue that a benefit to prison for him is learning to deal with the substance abuse problem, forcing himself not to do it. Now, in these prisons, state, federal, I'm very active with the hands. I got to scale it back for a second. Bear with me. In these prisons, there's a lot of hustle going on. There's drugs, there's iPhones, there's food. I mean, there's a lot of bad stuff in there. Hardly a day goes by in America without a guard getting arrested. So it's very likely that a guard looking to cozy up to Mr. Smollett for a myriad reasons, he could empathize with him, he may like him, whatever the reason may be, maybe looking to make some money, knows that he has resources. He may say, hey, would you like some meth? Would you like some heroin? Would you like some cocaine? These things happen in state and federal prison. So presuming he wants to find the benefits through this experience, the time on the inside can help him get free of substances that can cloud your mind and judgment. Continuing on, you do develop a sense of grit and resilience in prison if you're looking for it. So while I was a naive, scared 28-year-old kid crying in my friend's office with no dignity, oh, I can't go to prison. White boys from the suburbs and hills aren't made for prison. I was weak. I didn't think I could handle it. I'd never dealt with adversity before. Well, in some cases, prison was wonderful for me and beneficial because I learned about grit and resilience. I found perspective. So for him, as we wrote, landing in prison is one of the most brutal punches someone can take. But taking the punch, learning the lessons, and standing strong in the aftermath is an accomplishment only if you get through it with your dignity. It's one thing to go to prison and come out and not be able to share lessons learned. Then it's a total waste. Then the government's got you for the rest of their life. That happens too much of the time. The grit and resilience that comes from getting through the journey with dignity and strength and goals for the future are truly priceless. Those characteristics will be invaluable after the prison journey to take on whatever comes next. What Mr. Smollett has to do if he goes to prison is become resilient, not complain about everything, not bitch about everything, his job, his bunk, when he's getting out, his case manager, the food, the living conditions, the toilet, the shower. You want to know why? Let me go back to perspective. Some dudes in that jail have endured it for measurably longer. He can do it for 6 months or a year. He's got to become resilient. And he's got to share that resilience both in prison by, I think, documenting his journey and by sharing with his family what he's learned and how he will do better. Continuing on, letting go. Look, I don't know about you. I made a lot of mistakes in life, and those mistakes hurt people. I'm not continuing to punish myself for it at 47 in 2021. Some people have left some comments. You're very kind. Oh, you're continuing to punish yourself. To teach effectively, I'm taking you back to where I was in 2005, 2006, 2007, when I was in federal prison. But I feel as if I've earned my second chance. All victims have been repaid. I'm working daily to become better. But at the time in prison, it was very difficult to let go because I was so embarrassed and ashamed for what I had done. I never thought I could live a productive life. In the other room, I had two children yelling and screaming. I don't think they like what we made them for dinner. But at the time, I never thought that I would have children. It only began to get better. Mr. Smullett will only begin to get better if at some point he lets go of the bad decisions he made and then says, I'm going to create a better record moving forward. He can do all of that in prison. Further, even to his daily schedule, he's got to let go of things that he cannot control. The clothes, when he may be able to visit, especially in this COVID culture where visiting is shut down. He's got to let go of what he cannot control. That's the best lesson. That was the most helpful lesson I learned in prison, only obsessing and focusing on what I could control, which was my attitude. He has got to do the same thing because he has those that love and support him. He's got to be ready to come home, whether he works again or not. Continuing on, health and fitness. A benefit to prison is ample time to exercise. So as we wrote, the truth is that life can get so busy and complicated that we allow our health and fitness needs to fall by the wayside. I was very heavy when I went to prison, didn't find time to exercise. Part of the reason some people get upset about people that go to prison and call it a club fed is because there's ample time to exercise. Look, if you're there, you might as well make the most of the experience. It's better than sitting in the TV room all day complaining or sitting in the chow hall talking about the life you used to lead, the money you made, the people you knew, the judge screwed me, it was the lawyer. Yeah, if you're there, you might as well be productive. You're going to be living 60 yards from a track. Get walking. So a lot of these prisons are going to have, there's a gym, there's weights, there's stationary bikes, the track, there may be classes, yoga, ab classes, burpees. I'm not really a burpee guy. Okay. I'm not, but they're burpees. So there's a lot that you can do. So if he's there, it's really an opportunity to focus on your health and fitness. Continuing on, a huge benefit to federal prison. I can tell you, before I went to jail, I read like 2 books in my 20s. If he's in prison, a huge benefit is time to read again, time to think, time to read the authors, time to get back on track. Now, I'd encourage Mr. Smollett or anyone going to prison to read books that relate to the life you want to live on the other side. What I mean is, I'm not a big fan of reading, John Grisham or James Patterson, because it's kind of like watching a novel. Now, if you're rich and successful and never have to work again, that's fine. But if he's in prison and he needs to work again, or if he needs to learn about philosophy and accepting responsibility, then he's going to have to read books with a purpose, books that will help him succeed on the other side. Too many people in prison read books that they can't remember what they read. They don't know why they read it. It's simply passing time, and it's too much of a passive activity. You got to go from passive of reading to activity to actually writing. And I would encourage him while there, not just to read, but to write aggressively. And I'm sure in time he'll write a book, only if the book is for the right reason. I could write for days about the benefits to federal prison or state prison and what he's going to endure. In my experience, the most important thing that he can do from the moment he hits the compound is recognize this is a blip in his life, that most people have it worse, and this could be the best opportunity of his life. As crazy as that sounds, as insane as that sounds, it can happen. Nobody wants to go to prison. We're not stupid. We're not insane. But if you're there, make the most of it. Mr. Smollett, if you're watching, despite hundreds of comments all over our channels from people telling me, do not give him this advice. He doesn't deserve it. He hasn't earned it. He doesn't need it. He's not worthy of it. He is. We all are, because we can all become better than bad decisions that we have made in the past. But it only starts with saying, I'm sorry. I'll do better. I empathize with my victims. I'll never return. And here's my plan to do better. If he can do that, he'll get back on track and live a productive, law-abiding life. And who knows, maybe see him someday again on TV. Either way, I wish him well, because it's hard on his family, but he's got to do better. I wish all of you well. And I thank you so much for joining our community at White Collar Advice. I'm incredibly grateful, and I strive to be vulnerable, open, and honest, because that's the only way to teach. And that's what began to change my life in prison. Again, another benefit, not being so concerned about what people think, but focusing on doing the right thing while knowing you can't please everyone and get everyone back into your corner. And you know what? That's okay. Be yourself, be authentic, be honest. And now I'm rambling. Now I'm going to stop this video. I'm going to go have dinner with my kids and find out what they didn't like that we made, and get up again and do it tomorrow. Again, happy holidays. Thank you so much. Goodbye.